Friends, companions, allies on the journey, welcome to LifeLONG, where practical health meets real life and we work through our struggles together. I'm Ethan Suplee and I'm glad you're here. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the lure of Black Friday and Cyber Monday. All those health deals that are pouring into your in basket, they're flooding your feed. So if you've ever felt the pull of supplemental health promises, this is the episode for you. We're about keeping it simple, realistic, and doable. And today we have the perfect guest for that, Adam Bornstein. Adam is the co-founder of Arnold Schwarzenegger's The Pump Club and a longtime health and fitness expert. He's joining us to address both the practical and impractical approaches to maintaining or even completely resetting your health routine. Before jumping in, just a couple of quick notes. If you want to join the show live, go to twoway.tv/Ethan Suplee, register once, bookmark your link, and you are good to go anytime we are live. If you're watching live on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It's free and it really helps the show. Plus, stay tuned for news on tomorrow's Reddit AMA. Okay, Adam, welcome to LifeLong.
Thank you for having me, Ethan. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Dude, when we decided to talk about all the madness around the holidays, the lure, New Year's is right around the corner, but we just survived Thanksgiving and there is going to be a lot. It's going to be coming at us from every corner, all the biohacking and all the nonsense, diet teas and fat burners and all of that. The person I wanted to talk to you most was you.
Well, that's quite the compliment. I like to think that I am the maybe the little bit of sanity in the wellness industry. There are plenty of good players, but there are a few too many bad players that try to convince you need to consume everything, and oftentimes that's what takes people farther from their goal, which is terrible. It just leads to people really blaming themselves when right they were just misled.
Yeah, it can kind of knock you off. I mean, I've had it before where I went so far down a path, I completely forgot what my goal even was. And suddenly I'm working towards some unrealistic health metric, and the actual goal completely evaporated. For me, it was always weight loss. And it even took me many years to get more specific about that and dial in on fat loss.
Right. I think what happens is that health is so intrinsically important to all of us, no matter what state you're in, right? And if at some point things aren't going the way that you want, desperation kicks in. And then when that desperation kicks in, you try even harder. And there's this almost paradoxical effect where the more that you grind against this thing that you want and the more you don't get it, the more likely you are to buy into things that are the least likely to deliver the goal or the outcome that you desire, which leaves you exacerbated, which leaves you right pathologizing, which leaves you with a lot of self-guilt. And this then self-perpetuates where you believe you just need one more thing or to buy one more thing or to spend more money or in worst case, right, you think you're lazy or there's something wrong with you. And that's what we want to avoid, right? Because like it all starts from such a genuine place of, right, you're trying to improve yourself. But because it's important to you, you're very, very susceptible to mixed messages or to things that you don't need at all.
I have a clip queued up that I want to play, and then I thought this could spark an interesting conversation. It's by this dude, Rich Roll. Are you familiar with him?
I'm familiar with Rich.
I love Rich.
So smart, so
And I,
stoic. Yeah.
yes, I really like this clip. Trace, will you play this clip for us?
There is, this obsession with the perfect body and the perfect diet that's going to get you there. And this is all exacerbated by all of the biohacking and, the kind of 6 hour morning routine and the supplement stack and the cold plunging and the sauna. It's just like never, and like it's like, how many things do I have to do before I can just go live my day? Like if you added up, all of these things, like any sane person would go insane, and it's unsustainable.
I That speaks to my soul. I have a buddy who has enough money to buy a red light bed and have a cold plunge and have a sauna at his house and have all this stuff. And then he wound up spending even more money going to all the top experts on earth. And at the end of a 2-day gauntlet, they told him all you need to do is build a little bit of muscle. So eat more protein and do some resistance training. None of that other stuff is helping you. And this was like a revelation. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe he didn't need red light or ice baths or sauna or anything like that. And it's completely changed his life. Um, but I think like on a smaller level, Adam, this affects everyone. Like I know there have been times where I felt like I'm not going to make it because I can't afford X, Y, or Z. I don't have a personal chef cooking for me. And I just think often, the latest thing I've been hearing about, it might be old news by now, is like methylene blue. You got to get on methylene blue. And it becomes like exhausting. The whole thing becomes exhausting.
Yeah, I think, Rich made a really good point, right? That we get in this rat race where health ends up feeling like a game of the haves versus the have-nots, right? And I think the idea is that what's funny, but in the least comical of ways, is that the more that the health industry has increased from a revenue standpoint, the more diets we have, the more biohacking we have, the more solutions we have, the less healthy people have become
Right.
overall, which doesn't mean that none of these things work. But what it does mean is that we can't commerce our way into better health, right? What stands between us being healthier isn't necessarily the next big fad, right? But it's more about understanding or unlocking on a personal level what stands in our way. And like you said, part of it's getting really focused about what it is that you want to accomplish and trying to accomplish fewer things at once, right? We wear this badge of honor of trying to multitask in a way, but in so many times it works against us because we're all so busy. We all have so many things going on that if we're trying to accomplish too many things at once, we don't have enough focus to actually master what it is, but we're trying to do and accomplish it. And we believe, right, in this Black Friday, Cyber Monday mindset, that addition is how we are going to improve. And research usually shows that it's the opposite. It's subtraction that allows us to have the clarity and the focus and the less stress and the less anxiety to accomplish what we want. So rather than trying to add, sometimes a question could be, what do I need to remove from my life that's making things overly complicated for myself?
Yeah. I don't want to necessarily pick on any one single person, but anytime I see a fat burning tea, my skin crawls
Pick
because
pick on the fat burning teas because what a waste of money.
yeah,
What a gigantic waste of money. A very good way to give yourself diarrhea if you so desire. But
right.
that's the closest thing that it'll get to getting you to burn or lose something. You're gonna lose a lot of what you ate, but not a sustainable way to burn fat or lose weight or do anything beneficial or make you feel good, right? The idea is that there's going to be some discomfort with some behaviors that you need to change, especially if you've built behaviors that don't serve you but you're comfortable in, right? So I never want to conflate the idea of getting healthier as a joyride because there is some discomfort with change. At the same time, if you're doing something that fundamentally makes you miserable or feels miserable, is just so awful, not because it's hard, but because it's actually awful, like a fat burning tea, that's like when the red lights are going off and you're like, wait a second, this is not the way it has to be. Or if someone convinces you that, right, you must fast or you must take this supplement or you need to buy a sauna or you need to cold plunge or you need to do this one specific workout. Like there's no one size fits all plan that is just this panacea of fixing everything. And that's what we have to stay away from because that's the trap. Right? That's the
Yeah.
trap that if you can't get it, you like apathy can set in, this learned helplessness, or if you do it and you can't sustain it, you blame yourself, which is even worse, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to reconcile who you are, right? So much of the goals that we want is really a mindset game of changing who we think we are. And sometimes, and I know you've discussed this before, right? Almost saying goodbye to the person you are and creating a new persona, killing that old persona. So it's a mindset game. And the last thing you can do is be fighting who it is that you are or want to be and blaming yourself, because that's just a weight that's going to hold you back in every way.
Yeah, there's uh there's so much that you just said, but I even find it like I was, because I was on diets from the time I was a little kid until adolescence, and then I took a break and I didn't diet for a long time, and then I went back. And when I came back to dieting, like of my own volition, I wanted it rather than it being imposed on me. I kind of like had ingrained in me, whether it was like culturally or just because it was hammered into me so much as a kid, that it was the food. Um, and that if I just found the right type of food that was making me fat to get rid of, or if I ate the food that would kill candida or whatever it was, I was so desperate for one word solutions that I kind of spun in wheels for over a decade, to the point where even when I heard about the GLP-1s, I was super skeptical. I was like, no, this is never going to work. But I think there's an aspect that I was correct about, because I've talked to a lot of people who just hop on that and do nothing else. And down the line, they're not like, I'm not an Adonis, even that, it might take more than just that to get to where you want to get to.
It will, right? GLP-1s are an incredible medical discovery, and stop. And it's not the magic pill. In
Right.
and of itself, it does not solve everything. And if you don't do the other behaviors, if you don't resistance train, if you don't adjust your diet, if you don't build other supportive habits, either A, you're creating a complete dependency on this drug, which whether it has side effects and you can't take it, whether you can no longer afford it, and hopefully, right, they can drive down prices. But there are a lot of reasons where you don't want the dependency to be there, irrespective of the other behaviors, or it could open up other health issues, right? Everyone kind of overstates the amount of muscle loss that occurs on these GLP-1s. But what is not inaccurate is that if you don't eat enough protein and if you don't resistance train, you can lose a dangerous amount of muscle, in the same way that if you have a dramatic amount of weight loss of any kind, you run that same risk. And the more muscle you lose, the more you put yourself at risk for a wide variety of health issues. It's like you were discussing with your friend that, right, this fountain of youth, this magic pill, what we look for, it really comes down to like, do you move any type of movement? Do you maintain or build enough muscle so that your body will not become more frail or fall apart or not have enough grit and resilience to take on the demands of life? Uh, do you sleep enough? Do you find ways to not stress? And do you find ways to connect with humans? And within those, there are so many different ways that you can choose to exercise, or you can choose to eat, or you can choose to sleep or connect, right? But that's the foundational element of like when we really think about health and longevity and vigor and grit and all the things that we want to accomplish so we can actually live our lives without being held back by our health, right? We should be propelled by our health. It's not anything overly complicated, but it's also not just one thing. It
Right.
could never, ever, ever, just like we can't point to one thing that makes us overweight or unhealthy in the first place, right? Genetics play a role, epigenetics play a role, your movement plays a role, your diet plays a role, your environment plays a role, right? Your economic status plays a role. So it's very unfair to just say, oh, this is the one thing, but it's understandable why people get sucked in, because I call this like the diet book trick, that if you look across time, right? Diet books for the last 30, 40 years, they all follow the same exact formula, right? Step one, you're not to blame, or you've been fooled, or you've been deceived. Step two, let's identify the villain. Step three, oftentimes the villain is something that you thought was a hero or you thought wasn't bad. Step four, now we're just going to go ahead and now vilify this one thing. And if you just change this one behavior, everything's going to get better. Step five, follow my plan. and everything will be fine. It doesn't prepare you for any of the realities that, let's even say, this convoluted planet, right? We've seen this from with fat being the problem, and sugar being the problem, and carbs being the problem, and gluten being the problem, and dairy being the problem, and eating being the problem, and breakfast being the problem, and eating at night being the problem. And it goes on and on and on and on. And we can, right, you can look at almost like every different decade we have a new villain, but the packaging is exactly the same.
Yeah.
And then what's funny is like some of these will work in the short term, maybe some in the long term, but it doesn't even prepare you for anything that happens. Like, what happens when I actually lose the weight and it starts to gain back? What happens when I lose the weight and I still dislike myself? What happens when I lose the weight and I just thought everything would suddenly get easy and my life would be happier, and it's not. Or now I'm much smaller or fitter or more muscular, but I still have all of these feelings that have been carrying with me, right? There's so much complexity that, like, I love books, right? I write books, but the oversimplification, I'm not surprised why people think this way, right? Because it's been indoctrinated into us where it's just like, change this one thing, which wasn't my fault, and I didn't even realize was a problem, and everything will be fine. And it's like, can we just be honest with people? Can we just have an honest conversation about this without perpetuating this problem that's just causing people to carry this unnecessary load of frustration?
It's such a tricky spot because and I wonder, but I mean, I go back to my youth and I remember all the same things, whether it was like nightshades or stuff that caused candida, or and now we have, a whole movement on all vegetables are bad. This is like
Right.
the latest thing, right? No fiber, you don't need fiber at all.
Nope, it's gonna so bad for you.
Right, but it's you know, today I think it's Twitter's fault because everything was served up in 140 characters for so long. But that's not necessarily true because even as a kid, it was short, kind of pithy, one sentence slogans that were supposed to carry me off into perfection.
Fat free, eat your snack wells, all of the sugar you need to ever get diabetes, but no fat.
Right.
So don't worry about it, right? And it's just
Yeah.
it's same trick, different package.
So what would be something sustainable to help people get on track with this?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple things that one, as we discussed, if someone has a promise an end all be all solution to all of your stuff, just don't fall for it, right? Because it becomes something that's going to be self-perpetuating with blame and guilt and frustration. Two, whatever option you're choosing, I feel that health is a relationship. It's a relationship that you have with yourself. But like any good relationship, if you find that there are things within the relationship that are problematic, don't get into a relationship with that behavior, right? So if you want to try a diet, let's say you wanted to do no carbs, but like pasta's your favorite thing in the freaking world and you love it. Don't remove your favorite thing in the freaking world, right? It has to be sustainable like any other relationship. And to a lot of people who look at their behaviors and are like, there's no way I can eat these things, I'm telling you, right? You don't have to remove and restrict absolutely everything. So the foundation here is don't buy into those empty promises and don't buy into something that if you can't see yourself doing it for more than a year, truly don't buy it into the first place because that's why people yo-yo. They do it, but no one's ever had, no one can say that we haven't figured out how to lose weight because almost everyone at some point has like lost some weight and then they usually gain it back, right? It's not the losing, it's the keeping off and the sustaining. And part of that is that you're doing something that's going to get you to a point where you want to stop doing it. You hate your life. You hate what you're doing. You change your behavior and you find yourself exactly where you were. And it's like, well, why did it happen? There's a lot of reasons, but it starts with the fact that, like, you never were going to maintain this for a long period of time in the first place. And it goes what you're saying about diet culture. And then don't worry about specific foods. Worry about the type of things that are more likely to leave you satisfied. So I give people three diet tips in general, which gives them a lot of freedom. And this is just from an eating standpoint, because diet will play a much bigger role, just for instance, in weight loss, right? Weight loss is not the only element of health, but it is true that if you're in a healthier weight, you're much less likely to have other health problems. The majority of health problems that we see are a byproduct of just carrying too much weight or too much fat. Rule number one is go ahead and do not remove everything you love. Right? When I coach people one on one, the first thing I always ask, like, what food do you love? And they're always expecting me to go like, all right, we're going to torch this university
Right.
again.
That's out.
Good. We're keeping this in, right? Because if there's one thing I know, psychological burnout happens before physiological burnout. You lose your mind before your body quits on you, right? So I don't want someone to lose their mind and say this stinks because, right, because the whole idea, if we have consistency, if you have something to look forward to, if you have things that create some of that comfort so that you can change others' behaviors, you're more likely to have success. So don't go cold turkey on all the stuff that you like. Two, fiber is your friend. If for no other reason that like there's just a mountain worth of evidence that fiber works, but here's what happens as you start to lose weight, as you start to change your diet, as you start to eat less, hunger increases, right? This is it kind of sucks, but it happens. It stops eventually as your body learns. But the way that you fight against this is that you want to feed your body in a way where you are less likely to feel hungry. Fiber is your ultimate friend with making yourself feel less hungry, even if you're eating less. So I don't care what your fiber source is. Just find a way to include more fiber. It's very easy to argue that fiber is the number one nutrition epidemic because the research shows that you need a good amount of it, anywhere between like 25 to 35 grams. And the research shows that 5% of people do that.
Right. Well, I would say fiber can be tough.
It can't be.
The first time I read about fiber, I was like, oh my God, I'm nowhere near hitting my fiber goal. And day one, I just went from basically eating maybe 10 grams of fiber to 40 grams of fiber.
That's
That was a
aggressive.
tough day,
That's
rough day.
aggressive. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like anything else, the baby step, right? I'm such a big fan of baby step. Like, the something I should say about behavioral change is that when we think about setting goals, we think about these like big, hairy, audacious goals. But the reality of behavioral change is that you want to make it so easy that it's hard to fail.
Right.
Behavioral change happens when you make it so easy that it's hard to fail. And then what was once hard becomes easy, right? So you don't want to go from 10 to 40. Just like you don't want to go, I've never stepped into the gym. I'm going to load 225 pounds on a bench press. What's going to happen? You're going to be crushed. You're
Yeah.
you're going to die. And that's what it feels like if you probably ate 40 grams of fiber in that first
It
day.
was a hard day.
Go
Yeah.
from like 10 to 15, right? So it's like that's the difference of like adding an apple or
Right.
adding a cup of raspberries. And the idea again is like go in and look up high fiber foods, right? Google it, chat GPT it, do whatever you need to do to make it easy for yourself. And then identify one or two foods that you're like, oh, I can eat this. And it might even be eating like wheat bread. It might be eating oatmeal, right? It might be eating, I'll tell you, one of my favorite ways to get fiber in like my kids' diets is like the 365 like French fries from my are like legitimately have 6 or 7 grams of fiber. It's like 100 calories. You're eating French fries. There's like 3 grams of fat in it, and it's like 7 grams of fiber in
Right.
a handful of fries. And people are like, you're telling people to eat fries? No, not the deep fried ones that you can throw in your oven and eat them, and they cost $2 for like a huge package. You got 7 grams of fiber right there. You're
Yeah.
gonna feel full. Like potatoes are one of the greatest ways to feel full. No one likes eats a whole potato and like I want to go eat more. No, man, that is very, very filling. Fries can be the same way if you prepare it. And then the last piece of nutrition, right, is protein. Just because protein in the same way is going to be satisfying, it's going to be satiating. There are so many different varieties. I don't care if you're eating a vegan source like lentils, which also has fiber and can be filling. I don't care if you're eating a steak, right? You can get into the whole nuance of how much fat can I have and all of that. But like, right, then we're going down to different layers. If you make sure that you're keeping things sustainable and not getting rid of everything that you love, if you make sure that you're slowly but surely adding a little bit of fiber so that you can feel more full and you're not just hungry, right? And then if you can make sure that you are going ahead and eating some protein, irrespective of the foods you choose, you're going to be pretty well off. And then the last tip that I'll give is a lot of times we confuse hunger for something else. We confuse hunger for thirst. We confuse hunger for boredom. We confuse hunger for distraction, right? There's an amazing study that looks at what happens when we are a distracted eater. We're scrolling on a phone, we're watching TV, and people overeat. And the part of the reason this happens is that you have to understand we are at some points very, very simple creatures where we take in the sensory information to help ourselves make sense of the world. Now, if we all were slower eaters, and there's a reason I don't give this tip as much, life would be easier, but most people eat really quick, right? The average person eats their meal in about 7 minutes. Here's where this is problematic. It takes about 20 minutes for your food to digest. You break down your food, and then it sends a signal from your stomach up to your brain saying, hey, I'm full. So if you eat within 7 minutes, and your brain doesn't have time to know that, hey, I'm full.
Keep
You
eating.
you end up eating, and then like an hour later or 40 minutes later, oh, I'm so stuffed, I don't get it, I didn't feel full. Well, you were eating too fast. But like again, that can be a difficult change for people. If your whole life or your whole adult life you've gone through eating really, really quickly, right? Eating a slow meal can, it's a great thing, right? Interact with people, but like it can be a challenge. What doesn't have to be a challenge is being distracted because our eyes are helping our brain know how much we took in. And if you're scrolling or you're watching or you're not paying attention, you're not going to fill up as easily. Being more present in the meals that you are eating gives your brain the sensory information to say, hey, I'm more likely to be full. So if you end up slowing down in this process, if you take it in, that's another way to make sure that you don't overeat because you're just being more present with the food. And it's more likely also to make you enjoy it. Sometimes we're still hungry because we didn't actually sit and be with our meal. And you're like, what is it? Did I eat? Right? We scarf this stuff down. So I do think that can help a lot of people in terms of just like being present with the food that they have.
Yeah, I think those are huge. Those are like foundationally monstrous points to like think about and dwell on. Um, the eating when I wasn't hungry, I just figured I had an insatiable appetite. And I can to this day, if I'm not like checked, find myself like I go to a restaurant. I don't always do this. A lot of times when I go to a restaurant, I pre-look at the menu online. It's very easy to do. I make my decisions. So when I show up, it's like there's no more thought to it. But there will occasionally be a restaurant where I'm just excited to go there. I don't think about it. I get there, I wind up ordering too much, thinking I'm just going to have a bite of things. And I go into like almost a blackout trance of just shoveling food in my mouth. And thank God for my wife because I've given her permission. Like, if you see this behavior, touch my arm, bring me back to the present, make sure I'm communicating with the other people at the table because that's like ultimately the real point.
Right.
Um, but this is like stuff that, I've been this weight for 8 years. I still am finding like, oh, being present doesn't just come innately to me. It's easier now than it was, certainly, but I have to work on stuff like that. I have to work on fiber. I have to work on protein. I have to work on resistance training. I have to work on, am I actually hungry, or did that bright red and yellow sign just speak to my soul? Or is the smell of French fries in the air calling to me and I'm a little bored, you know?
Me too. Right? I think it's it's so easy, I think sometimes to believe it's easier for everyone else. And right, I've done this for a long time. Eating fiber is hard for me. For a long time, walking was really hard. I have dedicated the last like 5 years to just not be a sloth. I could go and hit the gym and right, and most days I don't feel like it, right? My reconciliation of the gym is like if I show up, I won
Right.
because I would say 25% of the time I feel like I want to go to the gym. And maybe like 10% of the time I'm killing it, but 100% of the time I'm showing up because I respect myself enough where it's like I know what it does for me. But outside of the gym for years, I remember at one point I think it was around 5 years ago, I like looked at my like step count accidentally in like Apple Healther and it was like you get 2,000 steps per day. And I'm like, oh my God, I am, I am sloth. And then you look at your fiber and like, I haven't ate a vegetable all week. And it's like, I'm supposed to be the health guy because it's like, right, we can oftentimes cover up for these things. And there's this idea that, oh, it's just easier. No, I think it's hard. And I think, it'd be nice if it were easy, but there's some joy to knowing that we all struggle with this and we can all share in this struggle together and then talk about it because that's what allows us to, I think, have hope that we can get better. If it was just fundamental, and yes, genetics are a real thing. Some people are leaner. They
Yeah.
are. Some people are more muscular. That is a truth that we can't escape of. But that's actually the minority of people. The majority of people, if you were to truly ask them, how easy is it for you? How enjoyable? How easy is it for you to like eat your meal within 20 minutes? Almost everyone said, no way, man. That is so hard. Or like, oh, I want fast food so bad. And I just like, and a lot of times it's having someone like your wife. I'm the
Yeah.
exact same way, right? It's having a supportive community or just even knowing that you're not going through something alone, I think can be so powerful because like it is. It can be very, very isolating when you struggle with your health because there's an amount of shame
Yeah.
we internalize that I think if people are being honest, even fit people, we all feel. We all feel this shame if we can't do this thing that was supposed to be good for us, or we don't have the self-control to go ahead and do it. And I think having the open conversations about these things, about the difficulty, about the struggle, about how you reconcile what you do versus what you think and feel, is part of how you overcome it and feel more human and realize that you don't have to be perfect in order to succeed with this stuff. You just have to be honest with yourself and good enough most of the time.
Yeah, the interesting thing about what you're saying as it relates to me is the first few times I had massive weight loss, I wanted to forget. I wanted to pretend like the fat version of me did not exist. I ran from any conversation. Somebody saying you look great made me so uncomfortable. It was awful. And it wasn't until I started, because I was being a little bit dishonest with myself. I didn't want to then be honest with other people about what I had done and gone through and how hard it was and how hard it currently was. I just wanted to go like, I lost weight, that's over. I'm now this. I don't have to think about anything. Problem solved. Ethan is fixed. And then I kept gaining the weight back, and it was like devastating and mortifying, because I felt like a failure every time. And it wasn't until I started really honestly communicating, like, hey, this problem doesn't go away when I lose weight. It's still here. It's still a work in progress every day, that I started to have some forward momentum, that I was able to then navigate life in a way where that I wasn't just being compulsive all the time, you know?
I think the more we voice the things that we struggle with, the more we talk about the things that we fear, the less it controls us.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to run from the things that we're embarrassed of. But there's a freedom to be able to talk openly where it's like, no, you're not bigger than me. It's completely different. But I remember, I don't even know if I've ever talked about this even publicly. I married for 14 years now. I was engaged in an earlier, younger part of my life. And I remember for the longest time, I didn't ever want to talk about it. I was so embarrassed. I viewed it as like this scarlet letter, like there was something wrong with me. Like, what was I doing getting engaged? Why couldn't I end up getting married? Can I not like be in a committed relationship? And I remember like how much friction I had when I told my now wife that I had been engaged. And it was just like, I mean, anxiety like you couldn't believe because I thought it was some sort of indictment
Yeah.
against me. And I remember the moment that I told her, and then just how much better I felt because I was no longer hiding like this inner secret that I felt like we just couldn't talk about. Whereas, like having the conversation and being honest with yourself about who you are and your behaviors is what allows you to grow beyond it and realize that it's part of your story,
Yeah.
right? Being overweight, struggling with your weight is part of your story. It's part of what makes you who you are. You can look at it as a curse in some ways, but I think you can also look at every single thing that you've struggled with is a gift, right? I've broken my back twice. I would not wish that upon anyone, but I would be a fool and a liar if I didn't admit that I am 100 times better off and a completely different person, given what I went through and given what I learned and given how it shaped me, even though it sucked. And I think we all have these things that we struggle with that we can either, choose to see it as a demerit, right? Or we can choose it to see it's something that will define us in a way that is truly unique to us and can end up being a competitive advantage. And I
Yeah.
do this for everyone. I think there's one thing I tell my kids. I got three kids, right? One of them is just one, so she's gonna end up hearing soon. Our superpower in life is not that we don't make mistakes, not that we don't fuck up, not that we don't struggle. Our superpower in life is that we always have the ability to make it better in some way.
Yeah.
Always. And in health, nowhere is it more true. I don't care how much you have struggled or tried and failed, we always have the ability to make it somewhat better. And it sure as hell beats the alternative to quitting and saying, I can't, or I'm not gonna try anymore. That
Yeah.
sure as hell does because I will bet on anyone who just has any desire to change and believe that they can, as long as you can kind of find that sweet spot and get away from this, like I need to biohack my way to a healthier self.
Yeah, man, the biohacking, that's just and the slogans that come along, and I'm not even really a political person, but like now we're getting legislation in place to ban things or to switch things, this instead of that. And to me, the fear is that people seeking better health or hoping for a society with better health are going to see these tiny little steps taken and go like, well, that's all we have to do. There's no more red dye 40, or we're now drinking cane syrup. All our Coke is being imported from Mexico, and it's better because it's cane sugar instead of corn syrup. And like now you can drink more. You can drink more Coke now because it's the better type of carbohydrate, the better sweetener. And to me, I'm like that falls into the universe of biohacking where it's just like this one little thing, you're missing the forest for the trees. You're staring at some little metric that's probably going to change nothing in the broad scheme of things. And we're going to be back here in 10 years talking about, there was a
And it might
there's
even be worse because
there
now
was
we're drinking more Coke because we got regular sugar in it. Everyone drink more Coke. It's performative, right? And
yeah,
it's not that, right? I'm apolitical like you. I can't stand politics because I think it's divisive for people, but where it becomes a line is not the changes that we're making, but the promises that we're attaching to those
right.
changes, right? Oh, we're going to get rid of all seed oils and fry everything in tallow. So we're great. We're just having another, like, we're telling people to eat more French fries. We're telling people to
Yeah,
eat more Coke. We're telling people to eat more candy. We're ignoring the food environment. We're ignoring the economics of this. So we're even like taking people, we're like people who do not have as much money are more likely to be forced into dietary decisions either because of food deserts, because of food availability, or the cost of fast food. And we're now making it seem like these foods are better for them to eat instead of trying to find ways to get these people more nutritious meals and support them. We're actually enabling a habit that has put them there in the first place. It's just like, man, remove all the dyes if you want. I'm not against changes that clean up the food industry. I'm against us again not having the honest conversation of what stands in people's way and what's actually going to make a substantive difference. I don't care if it's high fructose corn syrup, actual sugar, an artificial sweetener. It doesn't matter if this is where you're getting your calories.
yeah,
It's going to lead to somewhere problematic.
yeah. I go out of my way to avoid brightly colored food that is not like an apple, or not like, it's just not stuff I want to eat. But that
It
said,
is
like,
it is engineered to make you eat more, right? It doesn't
yes,
mean it's fundamentally evil. It doesn't mean there's not a play, right? If someone told me their favorite thing was candy, I'd find a way for candy. But ultra processed foods, right, are bioengineered to make you eat more of them.
yeah. I say all that, and last night I was fed on Instagram a video of a guy in California selling bacon wrapped hot dogs and sprinkling crushed red hot Fritos or Cheetos on them. And I swear to God, I thought, if I ever bump into this, if I'm ever walking in Los Angeles and I'm gonna eat one of those hot dogs, I just am.
Want to know what you're consuming that brought this up in your feed. Subliminally, someone
Yeah,
is talking to you, but no, it's just like right, and that's the part, right? Like I think if right when you get that urge, like, oh man, I'd really love to eat it. It'd be so easy to internalize this of like, oh, I need to go fast or go need to like work out for 3 days straight. And it's like, no, like if you were to eat that one thing, does it really matter? No, if you ate it every day, probably not the best idea.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Um, Trace, do we have any questions for Adam?
Yeah, we do. Ted has been on here for a while, patiently waiting to ask a question. Let's bring him into the show.
Hi, Ted. How are you?
Good. How you guys doing today?
Good. You look
Well,
like you're on the surface of Mars. Is that correct?
No, I was just in Grand Canyon country, and
Oh,
this is
nice.
one of the stops with the dinosaur prints.
I was gonna say, I feel like I got a dinosaur footprint or
Yep.
something like that.
Moanave was the name of it.
That's awesome.
Um, Adam, thanks for being here. In the sake of time, I'm just going to get into it. Earlier, you had mentioned balancing those comfort foods, those foods you love, I believe is the way that you stated it. As a type 2 diabetic, I struggle with carbohydrates. It's just for me, it's the facts. And I am one of the unfortunate souls who absolutely love carbohydrates, but I am super sensitive to it. And by that, what I mean is for me to maintain blood sugar control, I have to stay about under 20 carbs a day total, which doesn't give me a lot of wiggle room. And everything I'm told is abstinence is the way. And as you mentioned, it is hard to maintain. So if you have any advice for how to balance that, I'm all ears.
Yeah. So the problem you're saying is if you go above that, is it that the blood sugar rises too much and you end up having
It rises
hyperglycemia?
too much. And I find if I am eating carbohydrates that don't have that high fiber, I struggle with getting back to a normal range or an ideal range. And I have to maintain this. If I've been within control for months, maybe I can have an apple. Or I find something where the carbohydrate to fiber ratio is extremely high, I seem to do better. So like chia seeds, avocados. But man, like being an Italian and just being a foodie in general, those carbohydrates, they're in my soul. And I guess I struggle with abstinence versus harm reduction. And if I go off a little bit, then those pathways are lit up and I start to crave big time. And it's hard to avoid.
Ted, can I ask, are you insulin dependent?
No,
No.
not at this time.
Okay.
Right now, I am on a GLP-1, and frankly, like this past year, there's been a whole lot of crap, but like my arms are small. I can see some of that muscle loss. So I wasn't eating due to other stressors, and I just need to eat the right things and be consistent with it.
I have a daughter who has type 1 diabetes. So listen, I'm not a doctor. Adam, you're not a doctor.
Nope.
I get it.
So
Yep.
I don't know the intricacies of type 2 diabetes quite as well. I've been dealing with my daughter's diabetes for almost 17 years now. So I can talk about my experience as a parent with that. I was never pre-diabetic. Miraculously, I don't know how that happened. And so I just don't know what the mechanics are of like, are you checking your blood sugar?
I have a continuous glucose monitor. So and that helps tremendously. Like when I see the number in front of me, I'm also a needle phobic, which isn't good for diabetics. But when I see that number in front of me and I can check it as many times as I like a day, if it's high, it's just kind of that mental reinforcement, like keep yourself in check. Don't eat all those carbohydrates. It's not always easy, but it right now I'm just trying to get recentered. And once I have a good 2 weeks, a month, it just starts to build a little at a time. And just, maintaining that through stress is obviously the challenge. And looking at myself, my pattern is I'll do good for a while. And then, I somehow talk myself into, that cookie's okay. And then it's just a downward spiral. I guess, there's a lot of debate, is food addiction real or carbohydrate addiction real? And for me, I believe it is. I believe I'm a carbohydrate addict.
I wonder here, look, and again, I don't know your physiology, so I can't say what is absolutely correct for you. But I find for myself when I'm a sober person, so I am abstinent from drugs and alcohol. And that works for me. I'm able to do that because I do not need drugs and alcohol to live. But if I had to have a sip or a thimble of, vodka 3 or 4 times a day in order to survive, there's no way I stay sober. Even if that wasn't getting me drunk, I would wind up drinking a tumbler of vodka after the sip at some point.
Yeah.
So with carbohydrates and stuff, and I understand, and again, don't know the mechanics of type 2 diabetes, but I wonder if trying to make carbohydrates completely off limits is actually causing a bigger reaction when you have them. Like for me, if I was gonna not have alcohol, but then every 2 weeks I found myself slipping up and having a beer, I would definitely be blackout drunk on those days. Versus like with food, I've got to have a more neutral setting for myself in the day to day, because then the slip ups, they don't creep up on me in the same way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, yep.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you.
because there are a lot of different ways to look at it, right? And that's why I was asking when you get the blood sugar surge, right? From a clinical standpoint, right? And I'm not a doctor and I don't know your situation. The spike in blood sugar is not what's problematic, right? It's so an acute spike when anyone eats, blood sugar is going to go up. It's when it chronically stays elevated. So a lot of times it's very easy for us to have a strong reaction because we see something and it's very, very scary. But the question is like if we did nothing, what would happen, right? If you ate an apple and it would go up for me as well. What would happen 2 to 3 hours later, right? Does it drop? Does it not drop? Do you even give it a chance to see what would happen? So it's starting to identify foods for me, assuming that you can stay in control, right? Because the hardest thing here is that if this opens, right, Pandora's box, or this is the first domino, and then all the other dominoes fall, right? You eat the apple, and then you're a sleeve of cookies deep, right? Sometimes it does mean, at least in the short term, it's identifying how do I avoid that trigger that causes me to lose all control? Because fibrous carbs should help control the glycemic response, should help control what happens with your blood sugar. And even if it goes up, if it is down a couple hours later, that's not a problem because as type 2 diabetics, right? Type 2 diabetics, this is without a doubt, if you overeat carbohydrates, it could be problematic. But type 2 diabetics are there because of a body fat issue, right? It's why things like GLP-1s are so effective for many different reasons, but part of it is that it drives down body fat. It's how people who can go into remission from being diabetics, and I've worked with many of them because they're able to get their body weight down. So it is something to understand. Can you find some of these carb-based foods that you enjoy? Another thought here is can you, at least in the short term, create substitutes that are close enough to the real thing? I was very, very overweight as a kid, right? It was something that I carried with me. It shaped me, it pushed me into this field because I was the short fat kid, right? It was the kid who was like so overweight that I swam with a t-shirt on and would tell people I wore a t-shirt because I was allergic to chlorine. Dumb things kids come up with. How is the shirt protecting me from chlorine? It surely isn't, but right, we do. It worked for me in the moment. Oh, yeah, sure. Not at all. Right. And if there's one thing I knew, it's like I have a sweet tooth. Like I would believe like food addiction, sweet tooth. And in me making changes that I came up with a swap, and for oh my goodness, guys, I'm in my mid 40s, 30 plus years, and this is when like protein powders were disgusting. I will combine like a scoop of protein powder in Greek yogurt with like berries and some granola. And I've been eating that for like 30 plus years as a dessert because it gives me like a touch of sweetness, but there's nothing bad in there for me. Right? For I have made for my kids it's not the same thing as real pasta, don't get me wrong. But I've created like a zoodle, like a zucchini version of a pot. You get a good olive oil, you get some salt, you get some pepper, you really, really go ahead and saute that up. And if like you get like good produce, that stuff tastes surprisingly good. Right? I even couldn't believe it. Someone convinced me to try chickpea pasta, and I'm like, this thing's gonna be freaking disgusting. It was surprisingly good, right? And everything's gonna be adjusted to the culinary skill. But I do believe that if something is truly a gateway to maladaptive behaviors, right? You have one cookie, you have to have the whole sleeve. You have one thing of pasta, you find yourself just like eating it every single day, and you know that about yourself. The greatest gift that we can have is awareness, right? And so the goal, right, is to get to the point where you can, right, eat some of these things and then not begin the domino effect. But if that's too big of a step and you've tried that, the goal is, all right, how do I give myself a sense of this thing that I enjoy and replace it? And then I can maybe try the real thing and see if that works. And I think there's so many different alternatives. I had a client one time who, right, again, it was one of those things that like they loved sweets and they couldn't, right, they would make brownies and they would eat the entire tray. We had to make these like black bean brownies, and I remember her like laughing at me, being like, "This is gonna be the most disgusting thing. What's wrong with you? I hate you." And she tried it, and it was good. Even I was surprised, but like she enjoyed it and she was able to like have that thing that made her feel like she was doing something good. It didn't give her the same like rush. And it was just like we're reprogramming. So much of this is what we were talking about before. If you avoid this reality completely, it's going to catch up with you. So better to acknowledge the reality and then, like Ethan said, see if you can include small amounts of these things or find what you can include that doesn't have a bad response, and then you're armed with, all right, these are my safe foods right now. These are the ones that are still dangerous for me. Here are my replacement foods. And you start building a plan that works for yourself. And I know that if you stay on that track, and I know if you can find ways to lose weight and be consistent and move and do whatever it is, right? A lot of those physiological changes, a lot of those blood sugar spikes, right? They're not going to become as dramatic because then your body is working with you rather than against you. That's the hardest part about getting to any type of state, type 2 diabetic, right? You're too easily triggered. It almost feels unfair, but the reality is if you can get that weight going down some, your body starts to say thank you and things start to change. I know how difficult this is. I know it's a struggle, but I've seen it change far too many times. So I would say look at those like little tiny steps and see if some of those replacements and some of those like single foods that maybe aren't as bad, or like I said, see if you eat it and then watch what happens over 2 to 3 hours. And if it goes back down, I think that gives like people a sigh of relief. Like, oh man, like it freaks me out when I see it going up, but it went back down.
Yeah, dude. Halo Top is pretty much the only ice cream I eat. I never liked Pop Tarts before, but I do have a craving for sweets sometimes. Legendary
Legendary.
Foods makes a high protein, high fiber. I don't know if it's technically that high in fiber, but it's got fiber in it.
You
Pop
gave it to me the one time I was at your place. They're surprisingly good.
They're good.
Yeah.
They are.
And they make donuts now too that are great. I mean, my kids won't eat them, but I like them a lot. The edamame pasta, it's got lots of protein and fiber in it.
Love
They're
edamame. Yeah.
and like I sit here and I say like I don't make anything off limits, and I don't make anything absolutely off limits with food. I will eat pizza like 3 times a year, but like I have edamame pasta once a week. I have a protein Pop Tart a couple times a week. I have a Halo Top a couple of times a week because keeping it in my life cools the desire to go out to Baskin Robbins or something like that. So I can't, I utterly back what Adam just said and think like if you can find those sublimations, those ways of getting what you need from something else, that could be a good solution for you.
Thank you, John.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ted. Trace, we got anybody else? Trace, you're muted. Hey, Ryan, how are you?
Hey, Ethan, how we doing, man?
Good, brother. Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me on once again. Well, the holidays are obviously upon us, and for many of us, the old habits start to trickle back in. Now, I was somebody who grew up in a latchkey household, single mom, food scarcity, manufactured box dinners. I think Adam even said food deserts. Like, what are we going to eat? What should we eat? Microwave delectables, you name it. Do you guys have any suggestion, for those that have no culinary prowess? Is it getting back to basics? Is it the food prep? How do you modify your palate to something that tastes good, works for you, but you're not blowing your numbers up every day?
Yeah. I simple cooking tips go a long way, right? I think salt, pepper, garlic can almost flavor any dish, right? And it's just like the idea is, right, keep it simple to the point of like take something that you like to eat and then ask myself, how can I make it right? That's like somewhat healthy. And how can I make this taste delicious? And just start with one thing. I think people believe like you need a lot of variety in your diet or you need a lot of complication. No, like if you can find an anchor food, right? Whether it's a chicken or whether it's a steak, whether it's a fish, or even whether it's something like canned, right? Like I've got a kid who loves canned tuna. We make like tuna melts, right? It's like it's so basic. I take the tuna and I will put a little bit of salt and I'll put a little bit of pepper and I'll get him a high fiber bread and I'll melt a piece of cheese on it and it's a sandwich and he's got like 28 grams of protein in there and he's got 6 grams of fiber and it's like, you know what? It's not going to make its way into a health cookbook, but man, is that a balanced meal. man, did that just like check all the boxes. And I think that the joy of cooking comes from realizing that you don't have to have much culinary skill. I have no culinary skill. I do like the majority of the cooking in my household, because my wife doesn't like cooking unless like other people are coming over, and I just make it all really basic. But it's like I said, right? I gave the example where they're like the frozen French fries. Like I'll freeze up thaw some French fries, and I'll make people burgers. And we have burgers every single week. It is my oldest son, it's his favorite thing. But I'll get a burger that is 93% lean rather than 70% lean, and I'll get a good bun and I'll put whatever toppings I want on it, and I'm gonna eat it. And then what people don't realize is like the burger isn't inherently bad for you. It's just that most people will choose a quality of meat that again isn't inherently bad, but is gonna be 5 times more caloric. People cannot underestimate enough the difference between a 93-7 burger and an 80-20 burger is dramatic. You're talking about 20 grams difference of fat, which you're talking about more than 200 calories eating the exact same size patty,
Yeah.
right?
I'll
So
even switch it up for some lamb and do it a little leaner, things like that.
right,
Well,
exactly. And yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, hopefully not a shameless segue into a product, Ethan, but you had sent me this thing about 6 months ago, my friend, and this would be your prep deck. And that alone opened up my world to simplicity at best. His or flavor, you named that there. Adam, you also named aromatics. It's got to smell good to the senses. You get a carb in there, you get a veg in there, and you get a protein. And, after doing that just for a short period of time, now, not just diet alone, I was starting to move around more and things like that. The weight started to fall off. And like you said, Adam, my body started thanking me for it. And it wasn't just the motivation to see the pounds fall off the scale, it was the motivation to feel better in my own skin. And so I know that you dealing with your app and helping people through that journey as well is paramount to a lot of our successes as well. So, both of you guys are gurus in this fitness space or whatever space you want to call it, community, brotherhood, guys that have been through it, guys that have the good feedback and the good solutions for guys like us that just have, pardon my French, shitty habits, and we do shitty things with those habits.
But that awareness is going to make you win, right?
Yeah.
That awareness, and then like and being able to hold on to that feeling that you have when you feel better. So if you make a mistake or you fall back into those shitty habits, don't blame yourself. Just acknowledge it and move forward. But we always feel this, it's rarely the mistake that is the problem. It's the punishment.
And I just want to say for the record, Adam, which book of yours has all the recipes in it?
You can't screw this up.
You Can't Screw This Up is an incredible book. And for as much as you say you're not a culinary guy, I've made almost every recipe in that book and they're phenomenal.
Well, thank you. I keep them simple. The one cooking tip I will give everyone, because it's one that is so easily screwed up, right? We were just talking about the difference between having like a 93-7 lean meat versus an 80-20. Cooking oils are not fundamentally problematic, but cooking oils are very, very caloric. Most people don't understand that when they go to saute or cook or grill, they just like glug, 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 and they don't realize that they just put like 400 calories in their pan. The easiest way just to start, and as time goes on, you can make it a little more flavorful. The cap that the oil comes in, olive oil, whatever it is, fill the cap, put it in, let it simmer, move the oil around, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with dressings and marinades. Most people could eat the exact same thing they eat every single day and just cut back on cooking oils and marinades and sauces, not cut out, cut back, and weight would fly off because they don't realize that they're cooking, right? So a lot of people like 2 meals per day, and the oil itself has more calories than the meal in and of itself. And it is just, it's so common. We've all done it. I did it forever, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is so much easier, and it changes a lot.
Yeah. Adam, you're amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. This was beyond what I could have hoped for. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Anytime, man. I appreciate it, Ethan. Thank you for having me.
All right. See you soon.
All right, take care.
All right, before we go, a daily nudge from Bruce Lee and our lifelong collection of quotations to encourage all of us. Please play the clip.
From Bruce Lee, the successful warrior is the average person with laser-like focus. Do not fear failure, but do not be obsessed with success. There is a discipline in repeated effort, a devotion to mastering yourself, and in that devotion, the true path is revealed. One must be willing to begin again, to fail and rise, to try and try again, each time with more understanding.
Bruce Lee wasn't just a martial artist, he was a legendary movie star too, a total badass. If you have any inspirational quotes to share, simply post them to my brand new subreddit, r-Ethan Suplee LifeLOng. It's also a great place to discuss the episodes, post about your successes, and embrace the community. And before I forget, tomorrow I'll be doing a Reddit AMA over at r/lose it from noon to 4 p.m. Eastern. Swing by to ask questions or just hang out with the community. We can talk about snacks, walks, movies, music, weightlifting, whatever you like. If you've never been to a Reddit AMA before, get ready. They can get wild. Thank you very much for joining me. That's all for LifeLOng.